You recall that in a prior video we talked about Michael Green, this still alive Anglican priest who, in his semi-autobiography, Adventures of Faith, talks about the tremendous impact the church is having in Asia, specifically in Singapore, and the way the house fellowships and churches over there are just revolutionizing the way the Anglican Church does mission and ecclesiology, that is, doctrine of the church. Michael Green usually writes at the popular level, but this is perhaps his richest and most in-depth work, and I would recommend it unreservedly for all of you as basic reading. Evangelism in the Early Church, Michael Green. In this book, Green takes on the common misconceptions about how evangelism was done, even in the first century. This is what he says about the way Luke uses the word witness in the Gospel and the book of Acts. 3 points call for discussion in this examination of Christian witness according to St. Luke. First, he has a strong tendency to restrict the word witnesses to those who had known the incarnate Jesus. This is true of all the references apart from the last 3 in Acts. The witnesses are the people who have lived through the events of Good Friday and Easter and who can bear personal testimony both to their historicity and to their interpretation. It is because of this function of the witness to guarantee, so to speak, the continuity between the Jesus of history and the Christ of faith that Paul has to refer in 13:31 not to us witnesses, he was not in this sense, but to those who are now his witnesses to the people. And in that text in 13:31, of course, Luke is recording the sole example he gives of Paul preaching to a synagogue audience of Jews. And therefore it's extremely noteworthy because Paul in that sermon does not class himself among the witnesses. But as strongly did the sense of personal encounter with the risen Jesus overshadow the idea of witnessing, that by the end of the Acts, both Stephen and Paul are called witnesses. Both have a special vision of Jesus. The one sees Christ at his martyrdom, the other at his conversion. Second, it is interesting that the life of Jesus should be included in the content of the witness, particularly in view of the contemporary insistence in Germany that the life of Jesus was of no interest to the early Christians. When, then, did they write and read Gospels? It had nothing to do with the kerygma. Now, the word kerygma is often used by those, not just the Germans, but those influenced by them in church circles in the West, in the English-speaking world. Kerygma is the technical word for proclamation. So the higher criticism and moderately conservative criticism fix upon the technical meaning of the word kerygma, proclamation, as it is used specifically in the book of Acts, the facts of Jesus' life and his resurrection and the ascension, sometimes in the public message of the church. But Green is saying, in effect, that the word witness is far more satisfactory as a summary of the way at least Luke thinks of the message being distributed and authorized in the first century. You might say authenticated or accredited. The technical meaning of the word witness in a Jewish context would make Luke's choice of that word, I think, preferable to the notion of proclamation. So he sums up, Green sums up, there are then good grounds for E.G. Selwyn's words. Quote, I sometimes wonder whether the term kerygma, that is proclamation, has not been worked too hard, and whether the word maturia, or maturia, that is the word witness in Greek, and its cognates or related words would not describe better the primitive and indispensable core of the Christian message. So that's Michael Green's summation of the influence of Luke being diminished, as it were, by the failure to acknowledge that not only Luke, but also John's technical usage of the word witness in the New Testament makes all the difference to the authority of the New Testament. The proclamation itself does not authorize the apostles. The proclamation goes on in the church of all ages to today. But the technical use of the word witness is decisive in deciding what part of the apostles' work should be permanent, because they were not rendered infallible by their witness, but they were rendered authoritative for all time in all churches. And our failure to acknowledge that has led to all kinds of misunderstandings as to the nature of authority in the church in all ages, but it's crucial for our unity today. Michael Green, Evangelism in the Early Church.